I loved White Christmas for the music aspect. I was into musical theater. I've always loved musical theater. It's a bit of a family tradition. But you know, I'm not 25 anymore, and I have always said musical theater in particular is a young person's game. It requires energy, mentally and physically, to do it. I started acting when I was 10, doing musical theater. I was a brunette at that time. I was always cast in all the exotic parts. I wore goofy hats to school and did musical theater. Most people thought I was a dork, but if you have a sense of humor about it, no one can bring you down. I was a ballet dancer and that kind of bled into musical theater. I was constantly in rehearsal for one thing or another. I don't think theater is dying, and musicals are a great American art form. We've got apple pie, jazz and musical theater. What's missing in the musical theater is producers willing to nurture new work, raise the money and put it on. I knew I wanted to pursue a career in the theater the minute I graduated from college, having not pursued it. So I went back to school and got a degree in music and began working in musical theater. Theater, especially musical theater, is a collaborative endeavor. The success of the venture is about the team. I have intentionally not pursued musical theater. When I was in high school, I was a bad singer. I mean, all my early acting was musical theater, and my first ever show was Jesus Christ Superstar. Everyone's familiar with it. I played priest number 3 and sang so out of tune that it's not even funny. I grew up doing musical theater. Although my other ambition was to be a musical theater star, and I would attend college on a voice scholarship, writing was never far from my mind. I got started as an actress doing musical theater, and I always loved Grease, and West Side Story, and all those kind of movies. I would love to be in musical theater and be on Broadway. If someone were to offer me a position to do something like that, I wouldn't pass it down. I'm a huge fan of musicals and I really want to do that. I was there when the quote-unquote golden age of musical theater was flourishing. I met everybody who worked in theater or was famous in theater from the 40s on. I've auditioned for musicals a lot, but I think my voice didn't really match what they were looking for. I went to school for musical theater for a year and dropped out. Legit musicals are not quite my forte. I did musical theater, and I did dancing for what it was at the performing arts high school that I went to. I went to a school where I was there on a scholarship. So I think when you're on a scholarship, you always work a tad harder, or you want to work a tad harder than the next person. My whole background, my whole life was just lots and lots of theater, a lot of that being musical theater. I would like, if I can, to broaden the possibilities of the musical theater. I think there's a better Oklahoma, someplace, a better West Side Story, and I'd like to be mixed up in it. I want to make Broadway a word that doesn't have pejorative connotation. I don't want musical theater to be a dismissive term. I want it to be something that people can be proud of, that people can say, look at the possibilities. I've always been singing, since day one. I started doing musical theater and you have to sing in musical theater, and so that's where I got most of my training. So singing on stage, you just inevitably, when you're around other vocal artists, you get better at singing. I began thinking I would do musical theater because in high school that was really the only sort of curriculum they had as far as getting on stage and doing anything that anybody would see. So that's what I did. Musical theater is often seen as a lesser form of acting, although I don't see it that way. I went to Performing Arts High School, and I took dance and acting every day. Then, I went to Marymount Manhattan College and I have a BA in acting, with a concentration in theater performance and a minor in musical theater. I studied there for 3 years. I've never had any feeling of disconnection between the classical theater, or the contemporary theater, or musical theater, or the thing that we call opera. Look, I'm 40, I'm single, and I work in musical theater, you do the math. My love of musical theater was certainly not typical. I mean, it was considered to be very, very abnormal. In fact, I went to Elon University and studied musical theater. I usually did 2 musicals a year, but I also did a couple of plays. That was sort of always where I felt the most relaxation. If an American audience is given a serious musical theater piece that is well produced, dramatically gripping and wonderfully acted, they'll respond to it. I think there are rock stars within every subgenre, and for people who are obsessed with musical theater, Sutton Foster and Audra McDonald are like Beyoncé to them. I'm sure the a cappella world has their own version of that, and that exists in every geeky subculture. I got successful awfully quick, and I wanted it. But I do think there is responsibility to move the musical theater form forward. I think you always have to be aware of the work that came before and build on that. I'm trying to bring a new generation into the musical theater and to create a new audience. I wanted to be an actor because I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to do musical theater, and from that I realized I was interested in plays. I never imagined myself on television. I was so lucky to be on stage my whole life. Broadway has changed tremendously from the early days when the shows were referred to as musical comedies. Musical theater is now a more expanded art form. Back then, singers/actors were not the norm. From the 60s to now, it is necessary to do it all to be a consummate Broadway performer. I was trained classically in violin and voice, which led to musical theater. Then I left the music scene to chase acting, which is when Neighbors came along. It was a fantastic playground for actors, and the cast around me taught me a lot. I'm not into music, the only music I like is musical theater, but I have every Ween album. When I first got to New York, all I did was musicals. After a few years I had to make a conscious choice to close the door on musicals, because I was getting pigeonholed as a musical theater performer. As an actor, you generally don't get to choose what projects you are part of, so I've been very fortunate that The Book of Mormon was something I got to be part of. I don't want to be lofty, but it was groundbreaking, in many ways, for musical theater, so that was really thrilling to be part of. Sondheim is the Shakespeare of the musical theater world. We went to see all the shows. American musical theater and jazz were very big. I definitely wasn't cool in high school. I really wasn't. I did belong to many of the clubs and was in leadership on yearbook and did the musical theater route, so I had friends in all areas. But I certainly did not know what to wear, did not know how to do my hair, all those things. We've got to find a way to protect the process of making musical theater. We thought it would be great to see if you could put pop music back into musical theater. I like to originate new roles and characters for musical theater. I wouldn't succeed at musical theater. I've found that musical theater is my passion. Music is my passion, singing, performing. I play piano and musical theater is my background. In musical theater you have to be very big and very animated, while film and television are more toned down. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.